Salutations from space and aloha from Earth. Gemini Brett here on Sunday, June 30th, 2024. Happy birthday to my nephew, Kyle. Gonna miss you as you're away, dude. It's been a while since I've gotten to work the morning sky. Well, at least from my morning sky spot, which requires a bit of a drive, and at this time of the year, a very early wake up, since the sun is rising so early. And of course, when the sun rises to illuminate the earth, he hides the heavens. This, my friends, is why the 12th house is associated with hidden things. I'm sure of it. I used to say, well, you know, it's because of the hills, mountains, trees, houses, and these things that block our view of the eastern horizon, and there are many. But then I watched a sunrise one particular morning from, I think it was from Haleakala, from the House of the Sun, and it was like, oh, right. When the sun rises, there can only be one star in our sky. That one we call sun. So happy Sunday to you, friends. Although, you know, in astrology, we understand that days do not begin at the middle of the night. Certainly not some like 12 a.m. thing in clock construct time, but rather that days begin with the rising of the sun. And so, though my calendar says Sunday, and the dignities, if I cast a chart, we would find that we're still in the last hour of Saturday, Saturn's day, and a powerful Saturday yesterday with Saturn stationing retrograde. Anyway, you'll see that the topic of this drive home is called the Gate of Hades. Why? Well, that was an ancient name for the second house. Some say the second and the eighth. I try to make sense of that in the 8th. You know, of course, these days we associate, and for a long time, the 8th house has been associated with death. You know, there was a time predating that delineation where death was associated with the 7th house. And there's a lot of sense to that, right? I mean, you will often see in like traditional medicine wheels or other terms for traditions that assign colors to the cardinal directions, that black is associated with the west. Why? Because that's where the sun sets and night begins, right? And so many cultures associate that place of the entrance of night with the end of life. But in astrology, that's really more the nature of the 4th house, the IC, the Imum Celi, the bottom of the heavens, you know. But is that hell? I don't think so, but I would say, and I do teach, that it's the tomb and also the womb from which we will rise again. It's said that in Kemet, the land we now call Egypt, there was no word for death. They simply said westing. For it was known that what set in the west would, after its underworld travels beneath the ground through the Duat, rise again in the east. And in traditional astrology, the eastern horizon, the ascendant, the horoscopos, was associated with your entire life course, but also specifically with your youth, where the reach, which is the MC, the medium Celi, the middle of the heavens, the culmination above the ground, that was associated with midlife, and then resting in the west with the elder years, and then down beneath the ground is the tomb, which of course is the womb from which we will rise again. Right? It's really interesting. I have a baby who's about to turn 14 days old. And the things that I have found calm her most when she's in my arms, the thing that calms her most is her mom. But when she's in my arms, you know, she likes movement, she likes to be bounced. So we sing songs like, we gonna bounce the ounces tonight. Thank you. And thanks for helping with that one, Peter Tosh. But, I mean, amazing, like if she's really crying, deep singing, and songs like Lakota sweat songs, which, by the way, I don't know. I just find my voice going to places that remind me of songs that I've heard in a nipi, in Sweat Lodge. And I'm actually called to learn a couple of them. And the other thing is just oming. So like the other night, we let Mama get some rest, and Maya was in my arms, and she was just very distressed and crying, and I was trying all the things that I'm slowly being taught by her. But what I found is just, you know, like 50 of these. And then she was out and just slept on my heart for hours. It was so sweet. But like, you know, I'm oming to her, and she's like, of course I'm projecting and whatnot, but she like literally went through mudras. And we were like holding the Jupiter mudra together at one point. It was so sweet with our thumb and four fingers interlocked. But you know, it's easy to kind of make up story and whatnot, but just feels to me that she's very familiar with that sound. And look, it might just be the low resonance, right? Like the low hum, like what I like to ohm pretty low. And yeah, when I'm like chanting to her, it's low as well, right? Like we write songs and like silly songs together. A lot of help from my writing partner, who's her older brother Koa, on that one. But it's just like low stuff, and that might just soothe the baby, right? That might even be similar to womb sounds, and I don't know and would like to. But there's a story I like to see, which is like, oh, well, she was just like, you know, an old woman or an old man, and like a few weeks ago, right? Or who knows? So it's really interesting to consider the IC as both, which I call the roots, as both the tomb and the womb, you know what I mean? And of course, our babies, they know much more about life and death than we do, if indeed this is not a straight line, but rather a circular thing or a spiral. Anyway, I've kind of spiraled out of control here. What does any of this have to do with the gate of Hades? So again, in traditional astrology, the seventh, kind of the elder years, setting down beneath the ground, the tomb and the womb from which we rise, the ascendant, DMC, midlife. But you'll get words for those angular houses, like the seventh was literally called setting. And the midheaven was called the midheaven, the 10th. I mean, you get these very, oh, hello, dear. Babe, why are you just standing in the middle of the road? You have babies? Yes, you do. Okay. Always three. The fourth called subterranean, which just makes sense, right? And then we get these other house names from tradition that might not sound so astronomical. Like the 9th was called the house of God, and the 3rd the house of goddess. But see, when you connect the associated planets, the modern astrology connects the 9th with Jupiter. I mean, who, interestingly, in India is known as Guru, right? Well, never believe your guru is God. All sorts of nasty things happen. But anyway, you know, that the way that modern astrology comes after that, yeah, is that Aries is the 1st, Sagittarius is the 9th, Sagittarius is Jupiter, so Jupiter is the so-called natural ruler of the 9th. That's not how it works in the tradition. Planets rule signs, and they didn't even use that tricky word. They are the domicile lords and ladies of signs, but planets rejoice in houses, and the joy of Jupiter is the 11th, which was called good spirit. But the 9th is the joy of the sun. I mean, think about it. Modern astrology associates the sun with the 5th. Well, that's nighttime. The sun moves through the 5th at nighttime. So not solar, anti-solar. Traditionally, the sun rejoices in the 9th. It's midday, it's sunburn hour. And it's also the sun having reached his height for the day, culminated at midday, at true noon, and now on the way down in the cadent, the falling house. And so the sun and the light of day, and this was said to be the house of God. Well, the moon rejoices in the 3rd, house of goddess. And so these days people just teach the 3rd as if it is always Gemini and it is therefore Mercury. And we talk about the 3rd in communication, which is one of the many important skills to express our needs, right? And to receive nurturing and feel safe. That's when I go kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, this is who I am. 2, I'm in a body that has needs. 3, I better find a voice to express those needs if I want to receive and feel safe so I can dream. That's the 4th. And then I wake up as the divine child, the 5th, which reminds me I need to get up there and see about the divine child. But, you know, the primary direction, it's like the first house stars, they're the first to rise after any given moment's time. And then the second, the sextant house, will succeed the stars that are in the first to the angle. The 3rd are falling away from the 4th, actually. It's the 12th are falling away from the angle of the ascendant. Hi, Amy. The second, why is the second the gate of Hades? We'll go outside. And when the sun is in the 2nd house, you're already starting to see the light. Now, the stars are still out, right? The 3rd, very importantly, the house of the goddess, the joy of the moon. Well, I would suggest that delineation comes not from when the moon is there, but rather when the sun is there, right? It's the middle of the night, but now the sun has reached its roots and is about to climb again, or is starting to climb again. 3, 2, 1, lift off at the ascendant and day begins. And so really, what is the language of the 3rd house? It's the language of dreams. It's the language of the goddess. The second, why is it the gate of Hades? Because we have now visible evidence that the sun will rise, that we will transition from night, the sun in the underworld, to day. This is not the sun going into Hades, it's the sun coming back from Hades. Now, importantly, that really happens at the cusp of the 12th and the 1st, the ascendant, right? But you're starting to see plenty of light. I mean, too much light to see the stars, as I found out on my morning star journey. I got out there too late this morning when the sun is in the 1st and the birds are chirping and all the things, and I can start to see enough light to find that there's a bunch of goats on the hill and that I didn't see in the darkness, etc. But we smelled something funny, didn't we? Yeah, we did. Anyway, but yeah, when the sun's in the 2nd, check it out. If you're out there at night, you'll feel, by the way, if you're out there all night, that when the sun's at the IC, like you feel a cold in your bones, whether it's already cold outside or whether it's actually a warm night, there's a shift. when the sun roots at the IC down beneath. And I've really had a lot of joy being outside in Sedona with some students, and they were like, wow, the sun just hit the IC. I can feel it in my bones like you taught me. It's like awesome, right? Like it's a real thing. And then when the sun's in the second, you actually start to get some images that the night will soon give way to day. That's the gate of Hades. And so in the eighth, also at some point called the gate of Hades, you can feel that more and like, okay, day is going to become night. The shadows are long if there are mountains in the west, or certainly if you live in a valley, like the sun has already set well before it gets to the horizon. So there's a little bit on the gate of Hades on both sides. I want to read from Miriam here. Would the sun's joy house change if it's winter and its path is really low, depending on where you are on earth? So whenever the sun is highest per the season, it would be joyful there. Well, the sun is highest in the ninth in every season, right? That's the gift of the houses. Now, that opens the great debate around whole sign houses and quadrant houses or equal houses. Everything I'm speaking about, and I mean, it's really embedded in the ancient language. We find the ancient astrologers typically using whole sign houses for chart examples and for teaching. But these languages, like the gate of Hades and the house of God, it's all quadrant. So the sun is always at its highest daily peak as it transitions across the MC, across the meridian, from the 10th house position, the angular position, to the 9th house, the cadent, the falling position. And so whether you're in winter, spring, summer, or fall, the sun enters the 9th at midday, the height of the light, which of course is much higher in spring and summer than in fall and winter, but still it's halfway in time between sunrise and sunset when the sun reaches at the meridian midheaven and then begins its descent. All right, y'all. Thanks for spending some time. I'm gonna go see my baby. See you in space, friends.